Hi, I'm Dougherty, and I'm running for Congress because I oppose war in all its forms. I believe that we are on the verge of World War III if we haven't already entered it. The world's three biggest nuclear powers, the United States, Russia, and China, are in indirect conflict in multiple theaters. And any of those theaters could easily escalate into direct conflict, which could quite likely lead to nuclear exchange and extinction of human civilization. Our survival requires an end to war, quite simply. Now, war can take many forms. It can be conventional, as we usually think of it, with bombs and bullets. It can be information warfare. It can be economic warfare. And we Americans tend to think of forms other than conventional war as being humane or less risky. But other forms are just as deadly as conventional. US and European Union sanctions have killed 38 million people in the past 50 years. And other forms can easily escalate into conventional. For example, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, that was in response to the United States placing oil embargoes on Japan. And that is why I call for an end to all types of warfare and compliance with the UN Charter. In contrast, the incumbent Jimmy Panetta has voted to send every dollar of military aid that has been given to Israel in response to October 7th. He is fully complicit in the genocide in Gaza. He has supported multiple pieces of legislation that have waged economic and information war on Iran, and he currently is obliquely supporting conventional war in Iran. I believe this is in large part due to his donors. His largest donor throughout his 10-year career is AIPAC. Another of his large donors is Lockheed Martin. We need a representative who is not taking that dirty money, and I pledge not to. I am endorsed by Track AIPAC. You can go to trackapac.com and you can see that I have not taken a single penny from the Israel lobby. We need a representative who will represent his constituents, not those special interests. His constituents, not the empire. We need someone who respects domestic and international law, and that is why I'm running.
American foreign policy and military interventions. So the United States had a leading role in writing the UN Charter, which prohibits threat or use of force against another state's territorial integrity or political defense. However, military intervention abroad has been a consistent feature of American foreign policy. The United States has actively intervened to overthrow or weaken democratically elected leaders, often replacing them with authoritarian regimes aligned with what policymakers consider the United States' interests. From 1953 to 1960, key examples include Iran, Guatemala, Chile, Brazil, and the Congo. More recently, the United States has applied sanctions to weaken countries like Cuba and Iran, has invaded Venezuela, and has now waged an unprovoked war with Iran. The question is, do you believe the United States should respect the United Nations Charter and abide by international law? What approach to foreign policy would you subscribe to?
Yes, I absolutely believe in following the UN Charter. That is a ratified treaty, and therefore it is US law, and we must follow it. Yes, I believe in following international law. I mean, really following it. I suppose in some ways I feel like what's unusual about Trump is that he's not even trying to pretend that he's following international law. Not even trying to lie to us like I remember Bush did, getting us into the Iraq War. As for my approach, first of all, I do not think it's the United States' responsibility to decide who governs a particular country. I think that is up to the people of that country in almost all cases. If there is an extreme case of, say, a genocidal regime like in Israel, then it's up to the international community to collectively decide upon a solution so that the agenda is actually fixing the problem for the people of that country, not what we do. What we do is all about geostrategy, right? Suppressing our adversaries, weakening China, depriving China of oil, et cetera, et cetera. It has almost nothing to do with human rights or democracy, etc. I would also move to prosecute U.S. officials under any domestic law possible. For example, we had plenty of officials in both the Biden administration and the Trump administration that violated the Leahy Law. Let's prosecute that. We know for a fact the Leahy Law was violated by the Biden administration. They falsified reports so that we could keep sending bombs to Israel as they committed genocide. I would move for impeachment of any officials possible who have been involved in any of these wars of aggression, including the genocide in Gaza and the war in Iran. If I were elected in 2026, I would move to impeach Trump, Hegseth, etc. Okay, you know the list. So, lots of thumbs up, thank you. And I would call for an end of all the information and economic war that we're doing throughout the world. We're meddling in elections. We overthrow governments in a variety of ways, and we need to end all of that. And that's why I opened my speech with that, because it's not just about bombs. It's all these other ways, because these entanglements, all this meddling, ultimately gets us to war. How long have we been meddling in Iran? Well, the answer is decades, of course. And as I said before, when there is some kind of intervention with a problematic state, that has to happen through the United Nations. It has to go through the Security Council. And the Security Council is very problematic right now. Okay, we need to reform it. We need to get rid of this problem of one country holding up progress. And finally, I just wanted to say, free Palestine.
This question is about support for Netanyahu and the Israeli government. The United States has provided Israel with over $21 billion in military aid since October 7th, 2023, without conditions. To what extent do you believe that we have an obligation to arm Israel and to tie our actions to Israeli interests?
All right, well, Tuka, I admire you for speaking publicly on what you believe. You probably know this crowd isn't friendly to you. So first, I support an arms embargo on Israel. That means not just no military aid to Israel, but no sale of weapons. I call for an end of apartheid, which is to say, establishment of democracy in Palestine. And I think this can only be accomplished through the United Nations and international pressure, similar to what was accomplished with South Africa just a few decades ago. AIPAC and other Israel lobby entities need to be registered as foreign agents. And we cannot allow this lobby to distort our elections, to distort our governments. Our so-called representative, Jimmy Panetta, is controlled by the Israel lobby. We know that Donald Trump is controlled by the Israel lobby. It seems like our entire government is that way. And I want to make very clear that I don't believe I'm being anti-Semitic in saying this. I'm being anti-Zionist. I do not oppose Judaism. I oppose the state of Israel. I want a democratic region. I want a democratic Palestine or a democratic Israel. I don't care what name it's given. It needs to be democratic. And I think I've already said this, but the genocide is driving anti-Semitism. I'm seeing people in my own political circles that were not anti-Semitic, and now I hear some really ugly things from them. And I don't want to repeat the things, but it is happening. I know oftentimes that's a disingenuous accusation, but it is happening. I am seeing a rise in it. And the best way to end anti-Semitism is to end apartheid in Palestine. No clapping.
So we did invite Jimmy Panetta to come to this event, and he's not here. But so we anticipated that he might not be. And so we just wanted to represent his record. So Panetta on several occasions has voted for military aid to Israel without any conditions in those pieces of legislation. And he has refused to co-sponsor the bombs legislation, which does put conditions on military aid to Israel, in spite of advocacy by many of his constituents. The state of Israel has been accused by the United Nations and humanitarian and human rights organizations, including Jewish humanitarian group B'Tselem and the Physicians for Human Rights. The accusation is perpetrating a genocide of Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Well, in January of 2024, South Africa petitioned the International Court of Justice to charge Israel with genocide, citing the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, the destruction of their homes, and the blockade on food and water and medical aid. At that time, Representative Panetta signed a letter to the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, to, quote, express our disgust, end quote, with South Africa's filing of a, quote, grossly unfounded case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. So the question is, do you agree that Israel has carried out a campaign of genocide in Gaza? Why or why not?
I think my position on this has already been made perfectly clear, and so I'd like to respond to something that was said in the previous question by another candidate. The Iron Dome is not defensive when Israel is committing a genocide. That's like giving a bulletproof vest to a school shooter. That is not defending someone.
The United Nations Relief and Works Administration, known as UNRWA, has provided aid to Palestinians since 1949. It is the most highly equipped agency to deliver aid due to its infrastructure and employment of 13,000 people in Gaza. In 2024, the United States banned funding for UNRWA in response to allegations that Israel made that proved to be unfounded. At that time, Senator Chris Van Hollen stated, quote, denying funding for UNRWA is tantamount to denying food to starving people. To punish over 2 million innocent people is not just misguided, it's unconscionable, end quote. In December, this last December, 2025, Israel banned an additional 37 organizations from providing humanitarian aid to Gaza. So the question is, if you're elected, will you co-sponsor the UNRWA Funding Emergency Restoration Act and make U.S. aid to Israel contingent on lifting the ban on UNRWA and the other international organizations?
I apologize if I haven't been very nuanced and I'm kind of shouty. I feel very deeply about this. I am very angry. I feel like I am not being elected by the people here to go persuade the American people to turn against what Israel is doing. They're already there. My job is to go and fight against the powers that be that are resisting doing the right thing there. So absolutely, I would support UNRWA funding. The first two letters in UNRWA are United Nations. If you can't find a better objective, you cannot find a more objective body than that. That's the best we're going to be able to do. So the funding has to go through UNRWA. The humanitarian aid must go through UNRWA. As far as other aid to Israel being contingent on UNRWA funding, I don't think that should be controlled by the U.S. It must be controlled by the UN. The U.S. cannot be trusted to make such an evaluation.
So this question is about West Bank violence and what do we do about it. For decades, the United States has supported UN resolutions that Jewish settlements in the West Bank are illegal and must be stopped. The West Bank is home to more than 3 million Palestinians. It's been under Israeli military occupation since 1967. In 2024, the International Court of Justice declared this occupation to be in violation of international law. Palestinians are subjected to regular raids, destruction of crops, home and school demolitions, and physical attacks coming from both the Israeli military and Israeli settlers with no impunity. There's a Ceasefire Compliance Act of 2026. It states that the current ceasefire in Gaza, if the current ceasefire in Gaza is broken, or if Israel attempts to annex the West Bank, U.S. military weapons may not be used in Palestinian territories. The question is, for you on this first, would you co-sponsor the Ceasefire Compliance Act in 2026? And what can Congress do to stop the violence in the West Bank, the displacement of Palestinians, and the expansion of Israeli settlements?
So yes, I would co-sponsor that ceasefire legislation. As far as how I would go about resolving the situation, I would want us to work through the United Nations Security Council. And we need to get the U.S. to stop vetoing every single reasonable resolution that comes through the Security Council. And that, I mean, that's that kind of sounds pie in the sky, but ultimately it's going to have to be through something like that, an international body like that. It cannot be the United States. We are not capable of neutral arbitration in that conflict. We are a co-belligerent. So we're going to have to get some reasonable people in the Security Council, and I don't know, maybe that's going to take until 2028, but I think that's what it's going to take.
Just to catch up with Jimmy Panetta's record on humanitarian aid, in 2024, Panetta voted to ban funding for the UN Refugee Agency. And most recently, in January of this year, he voted to continue that ban. As far as the, what can Congress do to stop violence and West Bank displacement of Palestinians and expansion of Israeli settlement? The very first press release that Panetta issued when he was elected and in office in 2017 was to sign on to a resolution that criticized the Obama administration for allowing a resolution before the Security Council of the UN that called on Israel to stop the settlements in the West Bank. Apparently Representative Panetta did not align with the Obama administration on that. Okay, so question on campaign finance. How do you expect to fund your campaign? Would you accept money from any political action committees, and if so, which ones?
This is something that I care a lot about. If you go to my campaign website, you'll see maybe the first screen, it shows my pledge that I will only take clean campaign money. That means I will not take money from corporate PACs. I will not, I guess you can't take money from super PACs, but I will not collaborate with super PACs. I will take money from local organizations like Santa Cruz Bernie, which I have done. I will take money from individuals. I will take money from union PACs. I will not take money from foreign lobbies. I suppose that's not even allowed, although I guess we all know that there's some loopholes.
The last question before your closing statement is U.S. nuclear weapons policy. So the U.S. is currently investing $1.5 trillion with a T, $1 trillion to so-called modernize our nuclear weapons. What is your position on U.S. nuclear weapons policy?
Well, I certainly don't support growing our arsenal. We need to be dramatically shrinking it. Something like 150 nuclear explosions could end humanity because of all the dust that it kicks up, right? And you have a nuclear winter, and then the plants don't grow, and then we all die. So what I would aim at doing is getting the total global arsenal down below 150, just as a baby step, okay? Right now we've got approximately 6,000, and Russia has even more than that still, right? So let each country keep their nukes, okay, so that they're not afraid that they've lost their strategic dominance, and get it down below 150, and then we can start shrinking down even further until we get to 0. And that will take a long time, but that's ultimately where we need to get no nukes.
So just to represent Jimmy Panetta on this one, so if you go on the Peace Action website, there keeps track of votes of members of Congress. Panetta voted against reducing the number of existing nuclear missiles, voted against eliminating the development of new nuclear missiles, and against reducing Pentagon spending. So we've come to our last question it's not a question, it's a closing statement.
Thanks everyone for coming out. To me, this is really amazing. I ran against Jimmy Panetta in 2024, and events like this didn't happen. So this shows how much concern there is in the community. People are furious at Jimmy, and he should be here.
Yeah.
He should be here. By the way, I would support legislation that makes it mandatory for the incumbent to participate in at least one public forum. The voters deserve to see all the people on the ballot on a platform together thinking on their feet. It's hard thinking on your feet, especially if you don't really like public speaking like myself. But let's see it. You gotta speak publicly if you're gonna be a member of Congress, right? Let's see you in action. Whew. So I'm running as a Democrat. I'm the only Democrat running against Jimmy. We're in a deep blue Democrat district. If you are opposed to Jimmy Panetta, I am your best bet to get into the general election to challenge him if you like views that are on the broad left. Okay, I think I am the most viable candidate simply because of that letter. Also, I'm a nice guy, and I've got a campaign. You know, we've got people here wearing our campaign T-shirts, we've got yard signs, etc. Anyway, so it's a serious campaign. I'm really trying, y'all. But I'm going to be a fighter. I hope you got that from my comments. You know, it was all off the cuff, and you know, maybe I didn't use a lot of nuance because I'm just so angry. And I'm going to go to DC, and I'm going to fight like hell. And I'm going to make people really uncomfortable, and maybe embarrass myself a little bit. But I'm going to go there and fight like hell. I promise you. So I'm running so that we have representation for us, not big donors. For us, not the empire. And if you like the things that I've had to say, please go to seanforcongress.org. And come talk to me after this. Nobody ever talks to me. Come on, talk to me.
So now we're going to take like a 3-minute break.
This is a question for Sean about the Democratic Party. You're occupying one part of a very large spectrum of what represents the Democratic Party. And I would like to hear you talk a little bit about both your critique of the Democratic Party and the ways in which you would like to help reform it. And so that's my question.
Okay, well, those are two questions in my opinion. I'll try to answer both unless if they take the mic away from me. Or the bell, yeah. So my critique of the Democratic Party primarily comes down to campaign finance. I feel that it is bought, and I'm tired of getting promised all of these things that don't end up happening. You know, we were supposed to get the minimum wage increase. Oh, it didn't happen in the reconciliation bill because the parliamentarian said we can, and everybody's like, well, what is the parliamentarian? I didn't even know that was a thing, right? There's always some tactic, some procedural thing that nobody knew about before that stops progress from happening. And I think it's because the party leadership doesn't want it to happen, like obviously. And I think the reason they don't want to have these things to happen, things that we want, like a higher wage, Medicare for all, you know, I could go on. They don't want that because that's against the interests of their donors, right? So they're bought by their donors. So the way that we reform the Democratic Party is by reforming campaign finance. Now there's a chicken egg problem there. You're asking, well, how do I push them? How do we actually get them to do something? And people hate when I talk about this, but I really like the discharge petition, because the thing about the discharge petition is that you can get a bill onto the floor for a vote without party leadership being able to block it. That's how Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey got the Epstein Files Transparency Act on the floor. It never would have gotten on the floor if they went to committee. They used the discharge petition. And that's just a simple majority of the members of the House have to sign. If they sign it, then it goes to the floor and they have to vote on it. So I would use that for something popular, like how about a clean bill on a minimum wage increase? Okay, who's signing? Oh, you're not signing? Oh, I think I'm going to go take a trip to your district this weekend, and I'm going to have a chat with some people living there. Maybe go on some of their local media and ask, why aren't they signing this petition? I would use that kind of approach, pressure them to sign that petition. And I would go to Republican districts too, for something like minimum wage, because a higher wage is popular with Republicans as well, right? Like, minimum wage ballot props get passed in red states too. So I'm going to yield my time. Anybody else want to?
No, I'm really interested. I mean, this is kind of for Tuka, but also a bit for Anna, right? You know, the Trump took America by storm with the motto, "Make America Great Again," and America First. And during the election campaign, there was a lot of talk about how expensive war is and that we need to redirect our energies and our monies to Americans themselves. It seems like Anna's talked a little bit about this in terms of following the money. I mean, for me, it just seems really ironic. The $1 trillion to upgrade the nuclear war arsenal is exactly the amount of money they tried to cut from Medicaid, which many people in my world depend on, right? How do we think about the relationship between domestic policy and foreign policy? I don't think we talk about that enough.
No, I think it's a great question, and I really think, I agree with you. Our country should be first. Just real quick question I want to add to it is, starve the government. Don't keep adding more taxes, taxing the citizens to give them more money to have these programs that are causing problems.
Tax the billionaires.
Tax the
billionaires.
That's right.
Yeah, tax the billionaires is one of my positions. So I think we're paying way too much for our military, and it's because we are trying to rule the world. We've got this global military empire with, we don't know how many bases. I keep hearing people say a number like 800, but I can't believe that. Maybe it's over 1,000, who knows? Just closing the bases that we have is estimated to save us about $100 billion. And that's approximately what it would cost to get free college for the whole country. So that's a good example of a trade-off. We need to shrink this military down to just having the role of defending our own country, not ruling the world. And if we did that, we could have a military budget that's more in line with what we see in other countries. We could just cut our budget in half. We'd still have the budget of Russia and China put together, okay, so we're still safe. And with all that money, we could institute a number of plans, including free childcare and universal housing, and I forget the whole, there's actually a pretty long list.
Medicare for all.
Well, Medicare for all actually saves us money, so that's, can't get that. But yeah, close the bases, slash the budget. I'm always pretty clear about that. Yeah, end the wars. All right.
So hopefully in a few years, we'll have a different political situation, but we'll still be a country pretty divided. This will be for each of you, or whoever chooses to answer. How would you personally, if you're elected, reach out to the other side or try to fix this impasse that we're in where nothing worthwhile is happening?
You, in this question, are reminding me of one of my favorite bills that was introduced by Ro Khanna, and it provides for state-based single-payer health care. I think this is a really great approach, and what it does is it allows states to receive funding that would normally be going into Medicare, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act subsidies, and instead it puts it into the state budget, and then the state can implement its own single-payer healthcare system. So they can opt out of those other federal programs, but still have the funding. And that lack of funding is what is called single-payer in Vermont and California. So, blue states, we can get single-payer. Red states, do whatever you want. You know, that's up to you. And let the people living in those red states fight for something reasonable there. But in the meantime, we're not blocked, and we can have what we know is reasonable and what would be best for us. So that would be generally my approach, is as much as possible, get red states out of our way.
That's not collaborating though.
I don't want to try to collaborate.
Okay, yeah.
Can you each say what your website is?
My website is seanforcongress.org, SEANFOR Congress.org.